Welcome to the first battle of our Onslaught Campaign. This is out of the Siege of Cthonia campaign book. As you can see in my title screen, my regular opponent and I both play Loyalist armies, so we aren't doing the actual full campaign using all the rules. Also, both of us are still working on our forces, so we'll be starting with some fairly low points values and hopefully working ourselves up to higher points throughout the campaign. In theory, the campaign could be as short as 2 games, but neither of us are lucky, so no, that's not going to happen. This is the first Heresy campaign that either of us have ever done, and as this is the first campaign book in the new version 2 rule set, we plan to take the campaign slow and simply. So starting off, we'll each pick 4 basic stratagems from pages 139 to 140. Each stratagem will only be used once in the campaign. We're not going to use the character casualties rules. We are not going to use the Siege of Cthonia optional rules from page 144 and 145. We will be using the Siege of Cthonia core missions and deployment and rules from page 150 to 158. And after each game, the winner will roll off to see if we go to the last decisive battle. As I'm playing the Space Wolves, and I know my opponent very seldom, if ever, looks at my website, I can tell you what I've chosen for the Space Wolf stratagems. So first one, Forced March. I get to move my deployment border 6 inches in any direction, just as long as it doesn't go into my enemy's deployment zone or off the board. Second choice is Into Hell's Heart, which will allow me to deploy by deep strike without scattering. Third choice will be Big Guns Never Tire, so I'll have the option of taking an extra heavy support choice than I normally would be allowed. And my final choice is the First Cut, and that basically lets me choose who gets first turn and who deploys first. Now there's consequences for that one if we both choose the same stratagem at the same time. I believe we roll off and the winner gets to use it and the loser just loses the option. The first 2 choices are obvious for an assault-based army like the Space Wolves. The last 2 took some hemming and hawing on my part. I decided to take the Big Guns Never Tire in case I tried to use the Pale Hunter's Right of War. Normally this right restricts Space Wolves to a single heavy choice, so it might be nice to throw in a second heavy choice in as a surprise if I decide to use the Pale Hunters. Finally, First Cut. It was more a case of knowing our game and time restrictions. Most of the other choices were simply not suitable for us because we either didn't have the time or the units to be able to take advantage of them. Being able to choose who goes first on a single mission is always a good option, and even if we both do pick the same one, it'll at least make me waste his option as well. So, preparing for the game, we went to discuss what we wanted to use for strategies, and neither of us wanted to use a strategy for the first game. In reality, I forgot my list, and so did my opponent, so these lists are actually being made after the first game. So we rolled for our first mission and got the Crucible of War from page 154 of the campaign book. We rolled Hammer and Anvil Deployment, which is deployment edges on the shorter edges of the board, and deployment zones are separated by 24 inches. So the game gives us plenty of room to deploy all our small forces if we wanted to. However, you're going to see we're both holding something back as reinforcements. Table and terrain were provided by the local Warhammer World Battle Bunker. They had everything set up in advance for us so that neither of us could do anything sneaky. I'd like to point out my appreciation at this time to the bunker people. So this is the basic rules for the Crucible of War mission. It's a simple cumulative victory point system. For each objective you hold at the end of your turn, you get 1 victory point. Standard secondary objectives from the campaign book are also used, and the game will end after 4 turns. Player with the most points at the end of turn 4 wins the game. What would feel wrong later is the odd number of objective counters. Players alternate placing only 3 objectives. They have to be outside the deployment zones and 12 inches away from each other and 6 inches away from the board edge. Fairly typical description, but there's only 3. We rolled off and Space Wolves won the advantage, so they got to place 2 of the objectives. Special rules for this mission would include night fight, cause why not? I got the advantage and Space Wolves don't like being shot at on the first turn as they run up the table. Also, both sides would have reserves. I'm going to apologize now for the sound quality of the recording during the live action. There were some enthusiastic young players in the store adjacent to us, and they got kind of loud during our recording. So here we go with my latest army. We have the Land Raider. It'll take and have a unit of Slayers. I have a Jarl or a Praetor and a Speaker of the Dead. And I'm going to take 2 squads of 10 Tactical Marines. 1 will be in a drop pod, and of course 1 Contemptor Dreadnought, sitting here with a Melta and a Power Claw. So this is Graham's army. He's got a Vindicator, just plain Jane Vindicator.
Yep.
And a Sicaran with heavy bolters. Leviathan, once again with the Volkites.
Volkite twins, 2 of them.
Yeah.
And drill.
And the Power Fist.
And the Power Claw. Siege Claw.
Siege Claw,
yeah.
Okay.
And that, and Normals Infantry Squad 10. A 20-man 20. My commander.
Is he a Praetor or a...
He's a captain with a heavy bolter until I do the conversion.
Okay.
And heavy bolter squad, half strength of 5.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Logan.
You're welcome.
I'll get the name back later. So Graham, we're playing short edges. Graham's got his Leviathan and his Sicaran set up with the heavy bolters behind him, and a blob of 20 hiding back here, and he's keeping a squad of 10 in reserve. And he's protecting this objective here, which is just outside his deployment zone.
Yep.
On the other side, there's only 3. Space Wolves are deploying a tactical squad behind this. And I put the other objective over here, and I've got my Slayers hiding inside the Land Raider, along with the Dreadnought. And of course I have a squad of 10 tacticals hiding inside a drop pod waiting for reinforcements. I also have both the Speaker of the Dead and the Jarl sitting inside waiting to come out of the Land Raider. Tried to seize the initiative but failed. I moved this tactical squad onto this objective, no big surprise there. Over here I unloaded the Slayer squad so I could claim this objective. And as you can see, the Proteus tank moved over to the side, so he's got clear line of sight to Graham's Sicaran over there. And I moved my Dreadnought over here. I would have loved to have gone a little farther, but I just didn't have the range of movement.
Alright, sword brother,
so that's the end of my movement phase, going on to shooting.
Probably doesn't actually.
Land Raider shot at Graham's Sicaran. Unfortunately, I hit him once but wasn't able to penetrate the armor. Unlucky me. That's all the shooting I have because he's the only guy with a searchlight and nobody else is within 24 inches. However, I'm presently holding 2 objectives, so that gives me 2 victory points at the end of my turn. Starting with Graham's, or the Imperial Fist's, turn 1.
In this battle group.
So he's moved the Vindicator up on this side, and his Leviathan's following up, along with the heavy weapon squad. The squad of 20 has moved forward so they can be within 3 inches and claim that objective.
Which they got.
And the Sicarians move forward. He's just hoping to put more dents in my Land Raider, I'm sure.
Oh, it's pretty well over.
Yeah.
To be honest.
So the Vindicator took a shot at my Dreadnought. Unfortunately for him, it deviated, but it actually deviated over top of my Praetor or Jarl and my Speaker of the Dead and 2 of my Slayers. He rolled a 1 for one of the Slayers, and the invulnerable saves, actually they're all wearing artificial armor, they made all their other saves between the Praetor and the Speaker of the Dead. His Sicarian shot at my Land Raider, but unfortunately he just bounced off the armor.
He lives.
So Space Wolves turn 2. These guys hunker down. They're just going to stay and guard that objective. That's why I like tactical troops. I successfully brought in my reserves. There was no place for them really to go in the enemy zone, but by coming in here, I was able to take over this objective from my Slayers. I moved the Slayers, the Speaker of the Dead, and the Jarl into the Land Raider again, and moved the Dreadnought forward, and that's it for the movement phase.
So that's my Imperial Fist.
So these guys don't have a target, no shooting there. My Dreadnought fired at the Vindicator. Unfortunately, it bounced. I'm not close enough to get the armor penetration I wanted. On the other hand, the Land Raider managed to destroy the Sicarian. Managed to hit a roll of 6 on the penetrating, +1 because it's an AP2 weapon. Bye bye.
So that was an entire
Sicarian. That big 20-man blob lost 2 guys. 1 to heavy bolter fire and 1 to an explosion from the Sicarian.
That's right.
So that'll be it for the Space Wolves. Nobody's in range to do any charging, so that's the end of Space Wolf turn 2. Okay, so the Leviathan moved forward, came within 12 inches. My Contemptor decided I don't want anything to do with that, so I reacted and moved back. I ran away, as he said. Vindicators come forward a bit. He's trying to draw a line of sight to my poor innocent Land Raider. The heavy weapon squad obviously ran to get up on top of the gantry there, and the blob is slowly moving around behind the Vindicator trying to use it for cover, and his reinforcements came in on the back of the table over there. And that's it for turn 2 Imperial Fist movement. You can't do that. So Graham's finished his shooting phase. The Vindicator, he deviated off the table from shooting at the Land Raider. And the Leviathan, he went and hit the Contemptor, but the Contemptor made his saves. So that's it for Graham's shooting phase. He's now going to do his charges. So Graham tried to charge. Unfortunately, I rolled an Overwatch. I managed to hit him, but he made his invulnerable save. But he failed his distance. He rolled a 7. He needed a 10. So he's done a half move forward. Now I'm in position where I can charge him. That's it for Imperial Fist turn 2.
Now,
so Space Wolf turn 3. Nothing much has happened. These guys are just staying guarding that site still. Over here, the Dreadnought's not moving because if I move, I'll trigger his reaction, and he's got that wonderful reaction where he can charge. Over here, I just consolidated these guys farther into the wreckage, ruin, debris, whatever you want to call it. And my tank has come over here to get line of sight on the Vindicator. Will it survive? Time will tell. So Space Wolf turn 3 shooting phase. My Contemptor fired on the Leviathan and managed to inflict 2 wounds this time. And my Predator got 2 hits onto the Vindicator. One of them was a penetrating hit, and now the Vindicator is immobilized. Now we're on to the combat phase. So after a brief discussion with Graham, we agree this is kind of stupid for the Contemptor to try to charge a close combat armed Leviathan. Yes, the Leviathan has 2 points of damage. He's still a lot tougher and has more wounds than the Contemptor has. So on we go to turn 3, Imperial Fist movement. So Graham's movement phase is Leviathan move forward once again, and once more my Contemptor evaded. I doubt if I'm going to get away this time, but I figured every little bit helps. And he's run his heavy squad around the gantry. I'm not sure that's going to help him in the end.
No.
And his reinforcement squad of 10, they're starting to run forward as well. I think they're too far out of the game at this point to really help out.
Definitely.
So the Vindicator fired towards the Land Raider and managed to direct hit the Land Raider.
With 3 hits.
And the single hit did 3 points of damage. He did do penetrating, but it was all 3s and 4s, which are stunned and snapshots. However, Land Raider is reinforced, so it ignores all stuns and snapshots.
Yeah,
So
but the brutal shot.
the Brutal did do 3 points of damage, as near as we can tell. So he's got 2 points left. Okay.
No assault phase for the fist.
There you have it.
Yeah.
So no assault for the fist. However, he does get another point, so he's up to 3 points for holding that objective over there.
That's right.
His concern is if he moves his Leviathan to attack, this infantry squad will automatically be in range and be able to support.
Mm-hmm.
So
And
we'll leave it
there's-
at that.
Yeah, because the fact is, okay, let's run it through.
No, that's...
You pulled up the...
So, Space Wolves, final turn 4, I declared the, what did we call them? It's called Howl of Mordecai and Bloodied Claw. And so my Contemptor moved to the sides so that this squad of tacticals could move over. These guys are staying still, there's nobody within range that they could charge anyway. The Land Raider moved over a bit just so that he could take and get out of the line of fire of the Vindicator. Disengorged the squad inside. They moved up, and wouldn't you know it, Imperial Fist declared their counterattack special reaction. So we're engaged already in the movement phase. There'll be no shooting for these guys.
Nope.
But that's going to backfire for Graham later. Because what he's done
Is
by charging my squad, my Praetor has counterattack 2.
Yeah.
Everybody in my squad gets 2 extra attacks.
Like, we played this
So we did all our shooting. My sergeant with the plasma pistol blew himself up.
Yep.
The Contemptor hit and did not do anything. However, over here, there's no more Vindicator. We did another penetrating hit and rolled a 7 to make him explode. But he only had 2 wounds left, and I had done 2 penetrating hits. So he was gone one way or the other. Unfortunately, the Twin Link Heavy Bolter didn't do any hits on the heavy weapon squad up in the building. And my squad over here took their shots at the heavy weapon squad, and they failed to do any wounds either. So this squad is too far away from anybody to do any charges, so they could stay in guard. My Contemptor in this squad charged the Leviathan, and according to my measurements, that is just within 3 inches, so we still keep that objective. And those guys are already tied up and engaged. We'll just have to work through the close combat now. There used to be a lot more models here a minute ago. We finally, well, I lost quite a bit too. I lost 5, plus I took 2 on my Praetor. Meanwhile, he lost his captain and a whole bunch more. So he just did his morale test. He failed. He tried to flee. He did not roll fast enough. We're about to run down the big blob. Meanwhile, over here, my Dreadnought suffered wounds. The Leviathan directed all his attacks against the Contemptor, and because these guys managed to charge in, they get +1 strength because of the
Call of Morkai. They actually had a better chance of wounding with their bayonets than they did with the crack grenades. So we managed to get him, the Leviathan, down to a single wound remaining. Let's hear it for the Space Wolves.
It was at this point Graham called the game, and I couldn't blame him. I already had 7 points to his 3 points, and he had no hope of getting another point at this stage of the game. So the game ended at the end of Space Wolf turn 4. Totaling the scores, the Space Wolves got 7 primary points. Looking back, I lost a point in turn 2 when the Slayers jumped back into the Land Raider and Tactical Squad ran to the objective. Deep striking units cannot move beyond their initial deployment of 3 inches, so I had to take back that point. In turn 4, I had captured the third objective on the fifth side of the table, but I think the objectives near the Dreadnought and Tactical Squad combat should be considered contested, so I only granted myself 2 points for turn 4. Regarding the secondary objectives, slay the Warlord, while the Space Wolves Jarl went and killed the Fist Captain in a challenge, and even though he suffered a wound, the Jarl survived the battle, so 1 point for Space Wolves, nothing for the Fists. There were no models that qualified for Giant Killers, so big 0 both sides. And to me, the most controversial ones, Break the Rank and First Strike. Really, only the tanks had any chance of fulfilling these conditions in the first turn. Both the Space Wolf Raider and the Fist Sakaran shot at each other, but failed to damage each other. The Fist Vindicator, on the other hand, went after the Wolf Dreadnought, but I think it probably should have shot at the Land Raider and potentially assist the Sakaran in destroying the Land Raider in the first turn, just to get those extra points. So, end of battle, Space Wolves win 9-3. I did roll about to see if the final defensive battle would happen, but rolled low. You needed to have a 6 for just having won one game, so I expected that. So we'll continue this campaign on to the second battle. Sometimes the winner of the battle is the person who makes fewer mistakes. I think this battle is a good example of that. Graham was definitely not up to his best form today. First, the Imperial Fist placed that unit into the reserves. I do not know why, other than he was worried about my drop pod squad. The Fist needed to be able to react to wherever the drop pod landed, but unfortunately for them, the pod landed back at my lines of deployment, just so I could take over the guard duties of the one objective from the Slayers. This left the Fist reinforcement alone at the back of the table on turn 2, too far away to engage, while the Slayers hopped back into their tank and rushed forward into close combat along the table edge, far away from where the reinforcements could get into. Next, in his original deployment, the Fist wanted to use the heavy support squad to capture the objective. Unfortunately, or perhaps fortunately for him that I noticed, I pointed out the heavy support squad was not a line troop, so it couldn't capture the objective. This forced him to move the 20-man blob onto the objective, while forcing his heavy support squad to spend the entire game running around trying to find a position to shoot from. But it never made it. That brings us to potentially the next error or poor judgment call. That 20-man unit plus Warlord was stuck holding the one objective near their deployment zone the entire game. This force only had 2 sets of line troops, capable of capturing objectives. By keeping the 10-man unit in reserves, the Fists were down to a single line unit, 20 strong, able to capture objectives. Even if there had been an extra objective near their boarded, the Fists wouldn't have had the potential to capture it, as there was only one line troop on the board on turn 1. I think the Fists would have been better served breaking the 20-man unit into 2 10-man line units for better flexibility. While the potential of the 20-man squad is huge, that potential was lost as they were stuck there by their objective in order to gain points and never once got to move somewhere else or bring that firepower to bear. What made it sort of worse was the vague rules for objective deployment. Now I admit, his Leviathan annoyed me when he showed up with it, and normally I would have put the third objective closer to the center or someplace where both of us have a better chance to fight over it. I didn't, and instead placed it right by my deployment zone opposite where he had deployed his, where it was absolutely the most advantageous for me. I was beginning to feel guilty about this after the second turn, but by that point it's too late in the battle. You can't stop the game and start all over. So that wasn't the Fist's fault, that was mine. I think I would have preferred an even number of objectives for this battle, just for the reason of preventing that kind of shenanigan, or a rule specifying one objective had to be on the center line of the board somewhere. Finally, there was the decision of the 20-man tactical squad to countercharge my Space Wolf Slayer squad in turn 4. Basically, the Fists had a bad choice. Charge the wolves before the wolves charge them, or let the wolves get in the charge. Remember, at this point in time, the wolves had called on the Howl of Mordecai and Bloodied Claw. If the wolves got to charge, the Slayers would be +1 strength for charging on the turn of Mordecai, +1 strength for Furious Charge from Bloodied Claw, and +1 strength for using Forensian Axes. So instead of taking hits at strength 4 like any other Marine, the Fist would be taking hits at strength 7, with Speaker of the Dead granting the unit Hatred, rerolling missed hits on the first swing, and then wounding on a 2+. The Fist Tactical Squad really was doomed by countercharging. Unfortunately, the Jarl also gave the entire unit countercharge too, so instead of the wolves getting 1 extra attack for charging, they got 2 attacks because they were charged. I think the Fist did the right thing countercharging at the time. However, after the game, I was looking at it and I thought it was probably better just for them to go into Overwatch when the wolves charged in. 20 troopers in rapid fire range, standing still, so they would get the extra shot from Fury of the Legion. So that's 3 shots each for a total of up to 60 shots, hitting on 2+ with bolters. That's a lot of attacks, and I really doubt that the Slayers would have come through with as many models into contact as actually made it into close combat in this particular battle. So let's take a look at the wolf side. What did I do wrong? Mostly it was functional errors. First, in turn 2, I moved the drop pod troops too far. Oops, but okay. I costed myself a victory point, but I still would have jumped the Slayers back into the Land Raider in turn 2, just so they could move up the board faster, sooner. I could have left the troops in the Land Raider in the first turn, but I wanted those easy points, so when I move forward, I would have a bit of reserve in victory points, just in case something happened. So really, mostly the Space Wolves were lucky. Turn 1, I'm lucky the Vindicator didn't turn to shoot at the Land Raider in turn 1. Even luckier in turn 2 when the shot deviated off the table. The Vindicator alone had the potential of destroying the Land Raider in 2 shots. Third turn, the Raider was down to 2 hull points from 1 hit from the Vindicator. If the Sicaran had gotten a rending blow or 2, I could have lost that Raider in the first turn. I admit I did take a chance popping the Slayers with the Command's unit out on turn 4 and moved aggressively towards the 20-man Fist squad. I had hoped he would countercharge me with his Legion reaction, but I really didn't expect him to do so. He's fallen for that before. He knows what'll happen. I just lucked out on that. After he did the charge and just before we started fighting the combat, he was complaining to himself and to me that he had done the wrong thing, so he knew it was a mistake. At that point, I had a comfortable lead, and I felt I could take the chance to make the charge at that point. And in the end, it worked out for me. So that's it for this battle report. Hopefully the next one will be better and quieter. It was very noisy in the background there. In the meantime, here's hoping your dice roll well and your games are fun. Take care, everyone.